thank you all for being here, and it seems like it's been a while since we had class, which it has been a week or so, and so looks like everybody's back. So good to see everybody back this morning, and we're going to study from lesson 15 on Nathan the prophet this morning, and hope everybody. If anybody need a book, we've got books. If anybody needs a book, we'll be looking at Nathan this morning. As we Luke, I think as we left off last time, I was thinking, man, we've covered Nathan. I don't know that I've got enough. I don't know if I've got 45 minutes of Nathan left, but as you start digging in, you find out there's a whole lot of meat left on that bone. There's a whole lot we hadn't talked about, and hopefully we'll learn some things about Nathan this morning. As with Uriah, you think you know the story. You've heard the story of David and Bathsheba 100 times. And then you study about Uriah and say, man, I missed all that. He was a good guy. He was a loyal, faithful guy. And you kind of gloss over that. And I was the same way with Nathan. He's a prophet. He comes and tells the story, but there's a lot to that. There's a lot more about Nathan that hopefully we learn about this morning. So look forward to that. And so we'll get started. Cody, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Let's pray. Our great God and our Father, we bow our heads in humble thanksgiving for this day, for the rain we've received. And God, we thank you for all the creation blessings. We pray, God, as we are prepared to enter in this hour of study, that you would help us to try to understand David's heart. Help us, Father, to try to make that our goal, is to have a heart set on pleasing you. God, we also pray that we would be friends like Nathan to David. When we see sin in others' lives, God, we pray that we would be gentle and point it out to them and help them.
Amen. Thank you. And to the prayer that was just led, I think this Nathan, and I think Luke mentioned this before, or maybe it was Brad that mentioned it before. We all should strive to be more like Nathan, and then we should also strive to surround ourselves with Nathans. I think that's kind of the what I get out of this is, man, he was a good guy, and we need to be friends like Nathan, and we need to surround ourselves with friends like Nathan. So, thank you very much for that, Cody. Okay, so if we look at the start of the lesson, it's titled "A Blind Man Walking." So, what in the world? Who are we talking about there? Who's the author when he says Nathan the prophet? And he leads it off with a blind man walking. Who's the blind man? It's David. So what's he blind about? He's blind about his sin. So when this story takes place, how long has David been blind about his sin? Okay. Okay.
At the end of the chapter before, the time of mourning was over.
Okay.
So, a period of time has passed.
Okay. We know that the child is born and the child dies, so we know there's at least a 9 month. It's been a while. There has been a period of time, and there's a psalm written by David, and I didn't write the number down, that talks about how this is just sin eats at you. So he's had this sin in his life for a period of time that he hasn't confronted or hasn't repented of. And Nathan shows up, and he's been blind to that. He's been blind to sin. And that's what the author points out, that some of us are completely at times blind to our sin, and that is certainly not where we need to be. And it quotes Jeremiah there, which is always a verse I've always liked. Jeremiah 8:12. Jeremiah wrote of those in this day who had been accustomed to sin. They were not at all ashamed. They did not know how to blush. Jeremiah 8:12. And I've always thought that's a great verse there, that hopefully we never get in that shape, that to where we're so accustomed to sin, and that it doesn't bother us anymore, that we don't blush by it. And in the world that we live in, there's sin everywhere, and you can't even watch the Golf Channel without seeing something that makes you want to blush. I mean, and hopefully we'll always be that way. When we get to where that stuff didn't bother us, then that's a problem. And hopefully we never get to that shape. But Jeremiah says that was a problem they had back then. Certainly we have it today. They were not at all ashamed. They did not know how to blush. So hopefully all of us here will always be blushers. We'll know how to blush when something is sin and we see it as sin. Thoughts, comments on that? So, I am not sure. We'll have to have someone. Is it said in Jeremiah that even the pagans blush? That's what Miss Carol says.
Well, I don't know. I just remember that phrase.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that one for sure.
It's akin to Paul's words, though, in the Corinthian letter, things that even the Gentiles would find shameful. Similar phrase.
Okay.
There are things going on within God's people that they are tolerating, that they don't blush at, that even the world would find intolerable.
Right. Yeah. Very, very good. Yeah. And 1 Timothy 4:12 talks about the insincerity of liars whose consciences are seared, and that's the same thought. We get so accustomed to sin that our conscience doesn't get bothered by it, and that's the shape that David's in right now. But he is bothered by it. It says that the sin has ate at him, or it's been eating at him, and now Nathan brings it to light. And he had tried to blind himself, but it did not work. And on second page says, thankfully, spiritual blindness is not perfectly parallel to physical blindness. A physical blind man may have no hope to ever see, but the spiritually blind person can be made to see again.
What's interesting about spiritual blindness and what we read about in this chapter with David is how oftentimes we fail to see or blush or recognize our sin. We still see very well and very vividly the sins of others. Sometimes it might even be that that's what causes us to not be able to see our sin. We're so busy focusing on what other people have done wrong, whether it be to others or to ourselves. David has zero problem seeing what's wrong in this story. We can be like that real easily.
Yeah, we oftentimes, it's easy for us to say, hey, did you see that, or did you hear what they did, or what they're doing, but we don't recognize the sin in our own lives, and certainly that is a problem we all need to work at. The author says, the last paragraph there, in 2 Samuel 12, we find King David just following a series of sins: sexual impurity, lies, murder. David has been involved in a massive cover-up, and he may very well think he is free and clear of his sin. Again, this This is at least 9 months later. Yet God sends his prophet Nathan to reveal, rebuke, and reconcile David to God. At some point in time, everybody needs a Nathan. Let's learn from this bold prophet of God. At some time, everybody needs a Nathan. And I don't know if you all have had the experience in your life. I have a time or two where somebody said something to me, came and said, hey, are you sure that's what you need to be doing? Are you sure that's a good thing? And really, really, really made an impression on me. And I can still remember that. And, you know, that's an important thing. The courage it takes for somebody to do that, and then the attitude that when we receive that, what kind of attitude do we have about that? You know, a lot of times we don't want to admit that we're wrong or that we could be wrong. And so that's a difficult thing. But that person that has the courage to come and be that Nathan and point that out to you, you know, that's what we're studying about this morning, is the courage that Nathan had to do that, and what the consequences could have been for that. So now let's start with Nathan. What do we know about Nathan? Anybody know about his family, anything about Nathan? We know very little about Nathan. We know very little about his birth or how he grew up. All that we're introduced to him really in 2 Samuel chapter 7 and verse 1, where David, or actually verse 2, where the conversation comes up about Solomon wanting to build the temple. And if you look there at 2 Samuel chapter 7, this is where, now when it came to pass when the king, David, was dwelling in his house and the Lord had given rest from all of his enemies around, the king said to Nathan the prophet, see now I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwells inside the tent curtains. Then Nathan said to the king, go do that is in your heart, for the Lord is with you. So that's actually the first time that I'm aware of that we see Nathan come, his name's brought up. So he is a prophet. Evidently he is a counselor. He is somebody that gives guidance to, he's in the royal palace evidently, and he helps David with decisions that he's got to make. Here, it's kind of a positive thing. Go do what's in your heart. Then God speaks to Nathan later that night and says, you know, that's not how we want this to happen. We don't want David to build the temple. We want Solomon to build the temple. So, and Nathan comes and tells David that. So that's the first time we see Nathan's name come up. And then we get to 2 Samuel 12, which is where the story of David and Bathsheba comes to light. And we see the story here where Nathan has to confront David. So when David heard, or when God told Nathan what he's asking him to do, to go see David and proclaim this to him, what do you think Nathan's reaction was? Okay, he's the king.
He was probably a little bit hesitant.
He probably was a little bit hesitant. You think he was shocked? You think he was shocked? Roger's saying no. So you think he knew this story? Okay. Okay. So Roger's point is that he was going at the beckoning of Jehovah. So God asked him to go for sure, and God would protect him, or wouldn't let the king injure him or hurt him or kick him out of the palace, whatever. I guess when he first learns the story, I guess is my thought. Wonder how he reacted to that.
Well, don't know how he reacted in that moment, but we do know how he reacted overall. And
Okay.
I think that's what makes the thought a little bit interesting. What do you do when you find out somebody, really impactful in your life, somebody that maybe you've looked up to, somebody that has a lot of power, somebody that has done things right in the past, and it seems like they are pardoned. Whether or not David was known as that by that moniker, the way that we use it today, it's clear God has been blessing David. And so when you hear some unbelievable news, an elder and his wife are having marriage problems, how do you balance that?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? I would think that it had to be a little surprising, and yet, as Roger's pointing out, it doesn't jostle him from his mandate as a prophet.
Yeah.
It was a very effective story.
Okay, so Ms. Carroll said it was a very effective story that he told. Roger?
Prophets, we know, words that they use.
Okay. Yeah,
Also told them verse 2. When David confessed, Nathan immediately knows to tell him what. How did Nathan know?
okay. Yeah,
I think that factors into, we don't know what all God foretold. We know God foretold the prophets,
okay,
not just go here. He told them. Now, there were times, yes, if they do. Nathan obviously told in two other texts.
okay,
A lot that Nathan
okay. Right,
wrote. Not that God said you're not going to die. Prophets knew. Daniel, tell the king, whether God saves us from the fire or not, we're not going to do this. This was courage and resolve of a prophet.
okay,
I'm going to do the will of God.
okay. Roger made a great point. The prophets had the thought, if I live or die, I'm going to do what God has asked me to do here. And whatever the consequences are, I can live with them. He also mentioned verses 13 and 14 of 2 Samuel 12, where so David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord, and we talk about that a lot. This sin was not, against, he didn't say I've sinned against Uriah or I sinned against Bathsheba. He didn't say any of that. He said, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said to David, the Lord also has put away your sins. You shall not die. So he's made the promise that, that you're not going to die because of this. But there are consequences. There are some severe consequences, but you will not die because the Lord has put this sin away from you. Yes, sir.
We know ahead of time, what did God Nathan knows this.
Okay.
Maybe that I would just
Yeah.
without a doubt. But nonetheless, Nathan knew God had made an oath with David.
Okay. Roger's point is that David may have known, and Nathan would have known, that there was a promise made that through David and through his lineage that the kingdom would last forever. So that may have played into some of this. Any other thoughts, questions on some things that we've discussed? We'll let the female go first.
As we think about being a Nathan, a couple of things that we've already covered. We see someone caught up in something, and our instinct is to go and talk to them about it right away. But he waited on the Lord's instruction, and so things like praying about it, maybe sleeping on it a little bit to make sure that one of my Nathan friends has said, if I'm upset about something or I see something, I kind of sleep on it for a couple days to let my emotions settle, and then whatever is left over after 2 or 3 days is probably what needs to be addressed. And I think that's good advice, to just wait, pray, study. And then he knew his audience, and so probably if he had just gone and confronted David with the facts of what David had done, David's pride would have stood in the way. But he knew, to tell this story in a way that David would hear him. And so often we want to be right or be heard, and so we don't think about, how that person's going to receive it and speaking in a way that they're going to understand it the best versus us just getting our.
Okay, good points. First one was, if y'all didn't hear it, is the timing. How did Nathan, he waited on God. And a lot of times, to her point, when we see something that we want to address, we might just jump out there and do it instead of giving it a little time, praying about it, studying about it, and then going and having that conversation with somebody. And then the second point was
Knowing your audience.
knowing that how David would accept that and how to present that. If Nathan had just come in and said, "You've sinned, you're a terrible person, you had Uriah killed," but he didn't handle it that way. He came in with this story about the ewe lamb, and that provoked David to where he said, and then Nathan knew then, I guess that was his aha moment. Yeah, I've got you now. You've got it. You've understood what I'm trying to say, but the way he presented it was a fabulous way. Yes, sir.
I wonder if perhaps Nathan got the message from Jehovah they need to go confront this, but perhaps it was way more public and scandalous than it wasn't like it was a big reveal. I mean, Bathsheba's pregnancy was likely not hidden. The fact that there was this child was certainly not hidden. People can do math. Most people can do math. So anyway, I got a feeling there's way more scandal in the air than perhaps that this was a big secret and Nathan had to be told, which kind of puts another little spin on the story of David. Everybody sees this. You are the only person that doesn't recognize this.
Blind man walking.
Right, you're the only one blind to this, which perhaps puts a little different spin on the story.
Okay, good thought. Yes, ma'am.
Our fear for them. Thinking what happened,
Okay.
for them.
Okay, good point. Then he makes the point that when we have somebody we need to confront or somebody needs to be confronted, our fear for them should be greater than our fear of them, our fear for their soul and the sin that they're living in. That is, we should care more for that person than to be afraid to go and talk to them about whatever it is that it's a situation. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, good point, good point. We all should understand that when we transgress or when we sin, that it hurts God. I mean, we're sinning against God, and it hurts Him, and that should really affect us. And if it does, then we're in a good place. If we have that kind of relationship with God, that we know sin makes God sorrow for us, then that is a good thing. Yeah, good point. Thank you. Anything else?
Kind of on that vein of thought, Mickey, Bible where it says God was utterly scorned by David. How that feeling is.
Yeah.
Actually, utterly scorned.
Yeah.
There's billions of us on this planet. How many people each and every day?
Yeah.
How much love and patience, emotion invoked just on one incident.
Right. Good point. Yeah, God certainly has plenty to be upset about with us, but His patience and His long suffering is awesome for sure. So Nathan, he had a heart for a hard conversation, and that's very difficult for a lot of us to do. I only know of a couple of people that like hard conversations, and I wonder how they how they do that. I'm certainly not one of those folks, but David had the heart for it, and he was the right person, and God gave him the words to say, and he was wise, he was truthful, he was skillful in how he presented it. Just the way he presented the story, and how David just jumped right into it and said, and how he convinced David that he was wrong. I think he was very masterful in how he did that. So again, if we could have friends like that, that would be awesome. We continue to read other stories about Nathan that are not presented here, but one that is in 2 Samuel 12, which I think is kind of interesting, is when Solomon is born. What role does Nathan have in that? 2 Samuel 12 and verse 24, I think. 24 and 25. We're getting Nathan involved here again. What does he do here? Okay, Solomon is born. David and Bathsheba have the son Solomon, and Nathan shows up and says, I'm not going to call him Solomon. I'm going to call him Jedediah because of the Lord. And the word Jedediah means beloved of the Lord. So Nathan, I think, in a way, is saying, David, your sin and the child you lost, that's all behind you. You got a new son now. His name's Solomon, and he's beloved of the Lord. So he is the one that is going to be the one that carries the kingdom forward. And I think, in my mind anyway, that's important because Nathan's still involved, and he's kind of telling David, the past is the past, and now we're moving forward with Solomon. And I think that should have been. That's a little bit about what Nathan does. He's an encourager, and he's helping out. Yes, ma'am. We can. The little lamb. Okay, so Carol's cool. Okay.
David's got how many wives? But Uriah has.
Okay. Ms. Carol's point is with the ewe lamb, and she, in her mind, and I may fall in line, but I haven't been there yet, says that this is representative of Bathsheba, and that David already had wives. He had multiple wives. Uriah had one, and this story would have been meaningful for sure for her. Yes, sir.
I think it is. I think
Okay,
But it uses language that the Song of Solomon will also use later, and was like a daughter to him.
okay,
And that language sometimes might throw us to think about a husband thinking of his wife as a daughter, but or in the Song of Solomon, like a sister, but it implies a level of relationship that is far more than just carnal or focused on physical attraction, but deeply invested in the love. And we see that in Uriah. He has that, the men that are fighting with him aren't just guns for hire, they are his brothers. And his king is not just the guy that's calling the shots, he is his leader.
okay.
And it does really reflect that. If they are, and as I said, I think they are apples to apples. His love for Bathsheba was much different.
Okay, good point. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. 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 Yes. Okay. Okay, good point. Roger's pointing out that David was the anointed king. He was anointed by God, and Nathan knew that, and he was going to be a trusted and loyal servant for David as long as he lived. If you get to 1 Kings chapter 1, and the story that Roger alluded to, where Adonijah, the son of David, is trying to usurp the throne, and Nathan takes care of that situation. He's wise again. He meets with Bathsheba, and he says, go tell this story to David. David is old, and he's always cold. That makes me feel good, because I'm always cold. Now, I'm not going to get a Abishag, Donna. No Abishag. Yeah, I got off track there, didn't I? But the story there in 1 Kings 1 is, I mean, it's just a great story again of Nathan, how wise he is. He goes in and he presents the case and he says, Bathsheba, you go tell this story, I'll follow up with it. David will make the right decision and Solomon will become the king. And that's exactly the way it happened. At 1 Kings 1, if you hadn't read it, read that. It's a very, very, very interesting story, and how this plot that Adonijah has to take over is foiled. And again, Nathan is right in the middle of it. And then we read later that Nathan is counseling Solomon. So, I mean, there is a long period of history here that Nathan is involved in the direction that the kingdom is going. You know, if Nathan doesn't show up here and tell this story to David, and, you know, things could have went way differently than they did. And we don't think of Nathan as this important a character in Bible history, but he really was. He really was. I think that is amazing, the people that we kind of gloss over and we don't think about, but that they're very, very important. I think it's also interesting in Chronicles 3, in verse 5, David and Bathsheba have several sons, and what do they name one of these sons? Nathan. So they name a son that comes later, Nathan. So did they have high? I mean, Nathan has brought them bad news. I mean, at one point in his life, he's brought them some very difficult stuff to take. But when later in life they have a child, they name that child Nathan, and I think that's out of respect and for what Nathan meant to them and what he had been to them as a counselor and as a confidant and as somebody they could really depend on, who was always faithful to God and doing what God asked him to do.
And we may have in our minds that Nathan was this older prophet who came and mentored younger David, but similar age, or he might have been younger. So anyway, more of that friend relationship than a mentor relationship.
Okay. You didn't hear that? Michael made the point that we're not really certain about the age of Nathan as it relates to David, but it may be more of a friend than a mentor, or certainly not much older, because the lifespan that he lived, and you know, he was with Solomon and helping Solomon when he got started.
One of the stranger passages in this section, verse 15, which ends in a very odd way. I don't think it ends the way that we expect it to. Nathan went to his house.
Yeah.
After all this is over, Nathan went home. But I wonder, I mean, real estate in God's word is premium. I wonder, this is, I think we might, one, we don't know that at this point in the story, we don't know that there's been any real repentance. David has finally said out loud, I've sinned against the Lord, but he's not made any motion to show any sort of change. He's just acknowledged what maybe everybody else already knew. And Nathan doesn't stay there with him and say, we're going to get through this together, and I'm going to be with you every step of the way. And that's what he needs to say, and he leaves. And I wonder if there might not be a lesson for us in that. I don't think there's any doubt that Nathan wasn't there for him if he needed him to be there for him, as it appears later. And I think that's the great thing about that later on, coming and telling them the good news that the Lord loves your son, Solomon. It's not you're forever in the doghouse because you did something wrong. He's also going to bring him good news. But we have sinned against the Lord. We have sinned against the Lord. We address that. Not that we shouldn't expect to have the help from our family, but sometimes when we go and tell somebody something is wrong, step back, meditate upon that, dwell on that, pray upon that. I can't imagine that Nathan wasn't doing those same things at his house.
Okay. Good.
For 7 days.
Okay. Okay. So we read in the story that when Nathan brings the news to him of what's going to happen, that David prayed and mourned for 7 days for this child, and the child, as we know, dies. And then we have the story about David immediately gets up. First thing he does is go worship, though. If you notice, first thing he does is he go worship. See, that's in verse, excuse me, verse 20. So David arose from the ground, washed and anointed himself, changed his clothes, and went into the house of the Lord and worshiped. So when the child finds out the child's dead, first thing he does, cleans up, goes and worships. Went to his own house then and requested food. And then we get that verse 22, which is a verse that we've talked about, I'm sure, in times past. And he said, while the child was alive, I fasted and wept, for I said, who can tell whether the Lord will be gracious to me? So can we pray and fast and have the Lord change his mind? David thought perhaps that he could there. Who can tell whether the Lord will be gracious to me, that the child may live? But now he's dead. Why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? The answer is obviously no. I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. So I shall go to him. It's an interesting phrase there that David is saying, you know, he's somewhere that I can go see him, but he cannot come back to me. And we certainly, I think, allude that to paradise and to heaven. And will he get to see his son again? I guess that's the question. Will he get to see that son again? And David thought he could. He shall not. I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. Thoughts on that? Good thought? Yeah, it was a good thought for David to have, for sure. A good thought for us to have about those that have gone away.
What David said, and then Nathan's confrontation too ended with, when we think about confronting someone with their sin or seeing our own sin, it's important that we end with that hope that that's, Satan wants us to look at our mistakes and condemn ourselves, but whether we're looking at ourselves or others, it's important to end with that hope that it's not all lost because of this grave mistake that I made. There's hope there, until I'm gone, there's time to ask God's forgiveness, to make changes, to repent. And so I think it's important, whoever's sin it is, that we end the conversation with hope.
Okay, so Tara's comment was there that no matter the sin, no matter the amount of remorse or difficulty that it brings us in our life, we should always end those conversations, but there is hope. There's always hope for us to do the right thing, repent, and God to accept us and get on the right track again. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, reassurance and hope, I think, in that, what David said there. I certainly believe that. I think this is, the story of Nathan is also Proverbs 27:6. I was thinking about that, about the difficult position that Nathan was put in and what he had to do. Proverbs 27, verse 6. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. So when a friend has to come to you and present something to you that that you need to know, and it kind of wounds you, it affects you, it hurts you, but much better than somebody that's just kissing up to you all the time. Much better than somebody that just wants to butter you up rather than to tell you the truth about things that you need to know. And I think that Nathan had that ability. He was a true friend. He had the ability to present something, and he did it in a way tactfully and skillfully. And David knew immediately after it was presented that it was a problem, and he took care of it. We've got what is Psalms? What is the Psalms 51? Yeah, that talks about how David felt about that, about he'd sinned against God, and what the remorse and regret he had, but he knew that God would be faithful and forgive him of that.
One of the questions asked is the rebuke kind? And your verse there in Proverbs, what do we mean by kind? The world would think that a rebuke, any kind of rebuke, is unkind, but the real unkindness would be letting someone continue down a road that's going to lead to their destruction versus confronting them in whatever way they need to turn from that.
Yeah, good point. One of the questions was, is rebuke always kind? And certainly, the wounds of a friend, that verse comes into play there. It may not always be kind, but it's kinder than to let that person go on in their sin and never hear about something we know that needs to be corrected or sin in their life. So, thank you very much. We've beat poor little David to death, and we'll move on to Absalom next time. Thank you very much.